Hello, it's Sonia here, The Pretty Stitch. Welcome to my channel. If this is your first time joining me, I'm so happy to have you here. So today is Tuesday, and that means it's Tunisian Tuesday. So today we are going to be doing an 18-inch doll project with Tunisian crochet, and has a little bit of regular crochet mixed in with it, but it's mostly Tunisian crochet. And if you do not know what an 18-inch doll is, there are different kinds of 18-inch dolls like American Girl, Australian Girl dolls, My Life, Canadian Girl dolls. There's all different types. So this should fit a variety of 18-inch doll types. Their body sizes can vary a little bit, even within the American Girl dolls. Like we have some older ones from like the early 2000s, and their bodies types are slightly different than like a newer doll. And this is a great scrap project, so if you just have a little bit of yarn, so here we go, you can see this is not a lot of yarn here, and it's worsted weight number 4. So if you just have, 20 yards or so, that should be enough to make this project. So we're going to be making a really cute little halter top, and as you can see, I'm just using a regular crochet hook. So I'm using an H hook or a 5mm hook. I'm not even going to bother putting a rubber band on the end. I mean, you can to prevent your stitches from slipping off. So if you do not have a regular a Tunisian crochet hook, you can still do this project. I don't suggest the kind with the ergonomic handle. I do suggest one that's straight or an actual Tunisian crochet hook. Alright, so to get started, we are going to chain 20. Okay, so there's my 20 chains. We are not done chaining yet, but what I want you to do is we're going to place a stitch marker right in this last chain we made. So I'm just using a scrap piece of yarn to mark that stitch, because we need to work some more chains, but you'll understand why marking that will be necessary very shortly. Okay, so we actually want to chain 61 altogether. So that's 20, 21, 22, 23. Okay, so I have my 61 chains here, and we marked that 20th stitch right there. So now we are going to just work at the back bump of the chain, and we're going to slip stitch in the second chain from our hook. So as I said, this is a combination of mostly Tunisian crochet with a little bit of regular crochet. So we are working on one of the straps. Some of the straps I'll be able to crochet right on. I mean, we'll be able to crochet them on, but you'll understand what I mean. Some we're going to have to attach and then crochet. So I'm trying to save on some ends here. So I'm just slip stitching in that back bump of the chain until we get to our stitch marker. So this pattern, I would say, you do need to have some basic knowledge of regular crochet and Tunisian crochet as well. And if you've never done Tunisian crochet, I do have a playlist that goes over the basics to get you started. And this pattern does use basic Tunisian crochet stitches. Okay, so I am up to my stitch marker, so I'm going to pull that out, and I'm going to work one more slip stitch with the stitch marker, and then I'm going to continue across pulling up loops for row 1 of our Tunisian crochet part of this project here. So this part here is, as I said, part of the back strap. And now we are going to work the Tunisian crochet part. Let me get the stitch marker out of the way. So this is row 1 of our Tunisian crochet halter top here. And this is part of the forward pass. Tunisian crochet is always worked in 2 parts. So the first part, you're putting your stitches on your hook, and then the second part, you take them off, and each part is 1 row. Okay, so we should have 20 loops on our hook. And now we're going to get ready to work our return pass. So to start, we're going to yarn over and pull through 2 right off the bat. Usually we'll pull through 1 and then yarn over, pull through 2, but we're going to pull through 2 right off the bat because I want to have, sometimes it can look like a chain on each end, and I want the stitches to be a little more compact on the ends, so then we're going to do it like this. So just changing it up just a little bit. Doesn't, and you can do this for all your Tunisian crochet projects. It's just sometimes it's easier to yarn over, pull through 1 and then yarn over, pull through 2 because the last vertical bar that you're working in is a little bit more visible when you're yarning over, pulling through 1 for your return pass instead of 2 right from the get-go. Alright, so there is row 1 of our halter top. So now let's begin row 2. So we're going to work Tunisian purl all the way across. So that means our yarn is in front and we're just working that purl stitch, and we're going to continue all the way across. And again, if you don't know how to purl, it's in the playlist. Okay, so I'm getting to the end. So sometimes since we yarned over, pulled through 2, the last vertical bar can get a little crunched, but there it is. That's why if you're yarning over, pulling through 1 and then yarning over, pulling through 2, it's sometimes a little easier, but I like the way this looks better for this particular project. Okay, so we need to find our stitch at the end that looks like a chain. So there it is right there, and we're going to insert our hook, and that chain too can get a little bit hidden, but it's there. So we're going to pull up our loop, and we still have 20 loops on our hook, and again I'm going to yarn over, pull through 2 right from the start, and just do that all the way across for our return pass for row 2. Okay, so there is row 2. So row 3, we're going to work a purl stitch in the first stitch there. And now we're going to work a honeycomb stitch pattern, which is one of my favorites in Tunisian crochet. We're going to work a Tunisian simple, so in that first vertical bar. And if you don't know how to do simple, it's in the playlist. And we're going to work a purl stitch in the next one. So we're going to do Tunisian purl, Tunisian simple all the way across until we have 2 stitches left. Okay, so we have 2 stitches left. So our next stitch should be a simple if we're working in the honeycomb stitch pattern, but all of our end stitches are going to be purl stitches. So when you get to the last 2, you're going to work a purl stitch. So it's going to be like the edging, and then you're going to work in that stitch that looks like a chain there. And we still should have 20 stitches on our hook, and yarn over, pull through 2 for the rest of the row for row 3 here. Okay, so there is row 3, and now we're going to work row 4. So we're going to work a purl stitch in that first vertical bar. As I said, all of our border stitches are going to be purl stitches for this. So now we are working in the honeycomb pattern. So to start off with, we worked a simple and then a purl, but this one we're going to start with a purl. So what you're going to do is in all of the Tunisian simple stitches, so this one is a simple stitch right here, we're working a purl. In all of the Tunisian purl stitches, except for those ones on the ends, that's the exception, we're working a simple. So the purl right here has that little bump in the front. So right here, there's the little purl. You work a simple stitch in that vertical bar. And then the next one is purl, simple, purl, simple, until we get to our last two. And that second to last stitch, you work a purl stitch, and then you work in the stitch that looks like a chain. Okay, so now we are at our second to last stitch. We work a purl, and we work in our stitch that looks like a chain, just right through there, pulling up a loop, and now we work our return pass. So rows 5 and 6, we're going to be repeating rows 3 and 4. So for row 5, you're going to be repeating row 3, and row 6, you're going to be repeating row 4, and then we will start some decreasing to get our cute little halter top shape. So I'm going to keep going, working row 5 and rows 5 and 6, and I will meet you back. Okay, so I worked 6 rows, so you can see the honeycomb pattern starting to emerge, which I love. I think it's such a pretty stitch pattern. It is probably my absolute favorite with Tunisian crochet. Okay, so now we're going to work row 7. So we're going to decrease. We're going to work a decreased purl stitch. So I'm going to have my yarn in front. I'm going to insert my hook in those first 2 vertical bars and then work a purl stitch. And now we're going to continue in pattern of the honeycomb. So our next stitch is a simple, so that means we work a purl in there, because you always work your purl stitches in the simple and the simple stitches in the purl stitch. So the next one's a simple. And we're going to do that all the way across until we get to our last 3 stitches. So we started off with 20 stitches, and now we're going to decrease 2. So at the end of this row, we're going to have 18 loops on our hook. Alright, so we are at our last 3. So 1, 2, and then that stitch that looks like a chain. So we need to work a purl stitch decrease in the next 2. So in the next vertical bar, in the next one, work your purl stitch, and then we work in that stitch that looks like a chain. So just to double check, you want to make sure you have 18 loops on your hook. And we do. So now we just work our regular return pass. And then row 8, you're going to work even. So that means we're just keeping in pattern with the honeycomb stitch, and we're working 1 stitch in each. So you're still going to have 18 loops on your hook, just working the honeycomb stitch pattern. So our first stitch after I'm done this return pass will be a purl stitch. So yarn in front, working the purl stitch. And then our next stitch, that's a purl, so we work a simple. So we're just keeping with the pattern all the way across. And then your second to last stitch is a purl stitch, and then obviously you work in that stitch that looks like a chain. So before you do your return pass, you should have 18 loops on your hook. Because it can get tricky with the second to last bar. It does shorten up with pulling through 2 instead of yarning over 1 and then yarning over 2. So that's just something that you want to remember. So what I mean is, see that bar? It's there, but it's short. So if you're having trouble finding it, you can pop a stitch marker in there, and then that will help you out. Stitch markers, think of them as your friends with crocheting or knitting even. So I'm going to work that purl stitch. And then in that stitch that looks like a chain, and I'll do a quick count just to make sure. And we're on the right track. We still have enough stitches, so we're going to yarn over, pull through 2 all the way across. Okay, so there we go. There is row 8. So let's work row 9. We're going to decrease again, so we're going to work our purl stitch decrease, so yarn in front, working in those first 2 vertical bars. And now we're going to continue in pattern, so our first stitch will be a simple. So at the end of this row, you're going to have 16 loops on your hook. So we went from 20, now we're down to 16. So we want to create that triangular shape that you had with a halter top. Alright, so we are at our last 3, so 1, 2, 3, yarn in front, vertical bar, work that purl, and then in that stitch that looks like a chain, and we're just going to count to make sure we have 16. And we do, and we're going to work our return pass, yarning over, pulling through 2. So then for row 10, you're going to work even. So again, you're going to have 16 loops on your hook before you do your return pass. So our first stitch for row 10 is a purl stitch. Yep, there, oh, yarn splitting, let's do it. And then our next stitch is a simple, so we do need to work a purl in that simple stitch, keeping with our pattern. And then we work a purl in the second to last bar, and in our stitch that looks like a chain, and do a quick count that we have 16. And we do. And we'll work that return pass. So row 11, we are going to decrease again. Alright, so first 2 vertical bars, working Tunisian purl, working that decrease. And so our first stitch here needs to be purl. And so we will have 14 loops on our hook at the end of this row, row 11. Okay, so the last 2 vertical bars, work the, or last 2 vertical bars, work the purl stitch. And then our last stitch, and working in that chain. So let's check and make sure we have 14 loops. And we do. So counting is important. You just want to make sure you're on the right track and that you have the right amount of loops on your hook. So we'll work our return pass. And then row 12, we are going to just work even. So as you can see, we are just about done the main part of our top pattern here. So this is a quick project. And so we're going to work even for row 12. So Tunisian purl, now we work a simple, keeping with our pattern, our honeycomb pattern here. So I'm getting to the end of my row here for row 12. And we should still have 14 loops, and we'll work the return pass. Okay, so now we are ready for row 13. This will be our final decrease row. So we are going to work that Tunisian purl decrease. So we're going to have 12 stitches on our hook here. So our first stitch needs to be a simple because we're working on top of a purl and keeping with our honeycomb pattern. Okay, so last 2 vertical bars working the purl, decrease there. And now we're working in that stitch that looks like a chain. So we should have 12 loops. And we do, we're doing good. Yarn over, pull through 2 all the way across for the return pass. Alright, so now we're going to work even for row 14. So our first stitch is a purl. And then our next stitch is also a purl because it's a simple, keeping with our honeycomb pattern. Stitch that looks like a chain, and we do our return pass. Okay, so now you can see how we're getting that triangular shape going. And now we are going to work row 15. We are going to work Tunisian purl all the way across. And again, we should have 12 loops on our hook. And you can really see as we're getting to the end, like it's very, very difficult to see that second to last vertical bar, but it is there. So like I said, if you're really having trouble finding it, use a stitch marker. And then in that stitch that looks like a chain, so yarn over, pull through. So what I mean is I pulled through 2, so there is that vertical bar. So you could pop, oops, got a bonus ball of yarn. So you could pop a stitch marker right there to help you mark that stitch, to help you find it if you need to. So now we have one more row to go. We are going to be binding off when we're working some straps. So what we're going to do is we're going to chain 42 to work our next strap. So we're trying to save on some ends. Okay, so I chained 42. So this is my next strap. So in that back bump, second back bump, we're just going to slip stitch. So this is a regular crochet in that chain until we get back to our row. And we're just doing this, like you could just work the return pass and then attach the straps, but then again you're going to have some extra ends to weave in, and I like to try to avoid that if I can. So I'm going to continue just slip stitching up my chain here. Alright, so I'm almost to the end of my chain here. I've got 2 more slip stitches to go. And now we are ready to bind off on the main part of our project. So we're going to bind off in purl. So I'm going to have the yarn in front, insert my hook in that first vertical bar, and work the bind off stitch. So it's a combination of Tunisian purl and a regular slip stitch in crochet. And we're going to do that all the way across. Alright, so second to last stitch, working that Tunisian purl bind off, and then we don't want to forget that stitch that looks like a chain. And now we're going to chain 42 again to work our third strap. So I'm going to chain 42 and then slip stitch across my chain, and then I can cut my yarn, and then we'll just have to work one strap where we attach. I tried to figure out where I didn't have to, but it just wasn't working, so we just have to attach the one. Okay, so I've worked that third strap. I slip stitched down, so now we can cut our yarn. So I'm going to cut the yarn here. And so we need to just work our final strap. So what you'll do is you'll just attach your yarn at the end here. So I like to attach my yarn. I just take my yarn, I lay it over my hook, I just pull through, and then I can chain. So I'm going to chain 42 and then slip stitch up my chain, and then I can cut my yarn. So a little less ends to weave in. We still have a couple, but not too many. So I'm going to go do that, and I will meet you back. All right, so here is my finished top. I think it's super cute. I already woven the ends here. So obviously to dress the doll, you're going to tie this one around the neck, and this goes around the back. So I think it turned out really cute, and as you can see, I did not use up that much yarn, so I still have this much left. So again, just a couple yards to make this. So I hope you enjoyed this project, and if you did, please like and subscribe, and thank you so much for watching.